Hey, what are you kids still doing at this late hour of the night? Juana asked her children who sat comfortably at the couch. She crossed her arms and waited for an answer. Don't you know? It's already late. Tayo turned to her mother with a pleading look. Mom, please, we're just trying to finish this movie. It's so interesting, she said, her hands clasped together as though she were begging. Kahindi quickly chimed in his excitement. Evident it's true, Mom. We've already gotten to the most interesting part of the movie. We really want to know what happens next. With stern expression softened, but before she could say anything, Frank, her husband, appeared in the doorway. Let them be, honey, he said with a small smile. Tomorrow is Saturday, they can stay late. The twins let out. A chorus of cheers, jumping slightly in their seats. Thank you, Dad, you're the best, we love you, they said together, their voices full of joy. Juana shook her head. Inside you too, your father is spoiling you, but her tone had lost its edge and a small smile tugged at her lips. Come on, babe, Frank said, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. Let's go to bed and leave them to enjoy their movie. He gently pulled her toward their room as their parents disappeared down the hallway. Kahindi and Tayo turned back to the television, their attention once again captured by the glowing screen. The American movie had reached an erotic scene where the actress undressed herself and slowly climbed on top of a young guy who laid naked on the bed. Their lips were locked together as they touched each other's weaker parts, and the rest was history. Tayo stole a glance at her brother. His eyes were fixed on the action showing on the TV screen with an unshaken focus. She leaned a little closer and tilted her head. Hey, Kahindi, she said softly with a teasing voice. You're so focused on what's happening on the TV, but Kahindi didn't reply. He was so focused on the screen. She smiled and spoke again in a romantic tone. I can tell from your eyes that you're really enjoying it this time. Kahindi smiled faintly, but still said nothing. Are you enjoying it? She asked, leaning closer now. And if I said yes, what would you do? Kahindi finally responded. Still so focused on the TV screen, Tayo adjusted closer to her brother. A sly grin forming on her lips. Then we'll figure something out, she replied quickly. Kahindi glanced at her briefly, then back at the screen. He could sense something in her tone, something mischievous. Her gaze lingered on him, and her expression told him everything. It's obvious from your eyes that you want it so bad tonight, he said quietly, his voice barely above a whisper. And it's just as obvious that you do too. Because he is already set to strike. Tayo replied with a smile, her voice dropping even lower. Kahindi froze for a moment, but immediately covered his pants with his hands. You don't have to cover it. I've been seeing it always, Tayo said, with a softer voice. The tension in the room was thick, and the television continued to play, but neither of them was paying attention anymore. She climbed on top of his twin brother and gave him a deep kiss. She pulled off her nightwear and slow took off Cindy's trousers while rubbing his engine. Ah, you have it. Huge, Kahindi, she said in a whisper tone. Kahindi was already so lost in ecstasy that he couldn't say a word, but enjoyed his sister's touch. Tayo, are we doing the right thing? Kahindi queried in a fearful tone. What do you mean by the right thing? Aren't you enjoying my touch? She responded. That's not what I meant. Sis, I'm just scared that we might not be doing the right thing. Show just lie on the couch. Let me get this thought out of your head, Tayo said. Before he could respond, she pushed him gently onto the couch. She was trying to unzip his trouser when Kahindi stopped her. I don't think we're doing the right thing, he said, his voice trembling. Please, get off me. He pushed her aside, stood up abruptly, and walked into their room. Tayo was left alone in the parlor, biting and licking her tongue. Morning arrived too quickly for Tayo. She hadn't slept a wink. Her mind was racing as she waited for the new day to begin. It was Saturday, a day without school, and their parents had already left early in the morning, leaving the 16-year-old twins home alone. The house was quiet, except for the soft hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. Tayo found her brother in the kitchen making toast. She leaned against the doorframe, watching him for a moment before speaking. "You just walked out on me last night," she said, her voice cutting through the stillness. Kahindi paused, his hands resting on the counter. He didn't turn to face her as he replied, "Yeah, I had to, because my body was shaking. Like I had a fever. When you climb on top of me, you have to feel that way." "Because it was your first time," she said sharply, stepping closer to where he stands. "You need to stop acting like a baby. Kahindi, be a man. Take a bold step for once." He turned to face her, his expression conflicted. "It's not about being bold, Tayo. It just didn't feel right." "I couldn't," she interrupted him, her eyes narrowing. "If you can't do it, then maybe I should start calling you a girl. I won't see you as a mun anymore," she added. At noon, Tayo walked out of the bathroom to their room and saw Kahindi wearing only a towel tied round his waist. He pulled off the towel while applying some cream on his body. A hand circled around his chest from behind. "What the is wrong with you?" Kahindi can't control himself again. He was already feeling her. "Touch, look. Brother? Your D is already hard. Let's do this. Please stop proving stubborn," she added. Kahindi let loose of himself while nodding his head like a lizard. Taiwo whispered to his ear that he should allow them do it. Like the men they watched on the TV yesterday's night, she gently undressed herself, and both of them fell on the bed naked while they were arguing. A neighbor was eavesdropping on them from the window and decided to go and knock on their door. "Blood of Jesus." "What are you twins doing?" the neighbor screamed after seeing Kahindi and Tai's naked body touching each other on the bed. "Your parents must hear this." The twins froze. Their faces were pale with shock. They went on their knees pleading with her with their trembling voices. They begged not to report the incident to their parents, but the neighbor face remained stern. "No, I can't let this slide. This is a deadly act, and your parents need to hear and stop it before it's too late." She then turned to Kahindi. "Why are you having an affair with your twin sister?" Cindy's hands trembled, his eyes glistening with tears. "It wasn't my fault," he stammered. "She forced herself on me." "What, she forced herself on you?" She repeated, her voice rising with disbelief. Tayo stood silent, her head bowed, saying nothing in her defense. "I can't let this go. You need to be punished dearly for this," the neighbor declared without another word. She left the house the moment the door slammed shut. Kahindi turned to his sister, his face a mixture of fear and frustration. "Do you see what you've caused? I told you this won't bring any positive result. Why do you always let little things bother you? See how you're shivering in fear?" Tayo replied with a calm voice. "She's just a nosy neighbor. What makes you think Mom and Dad will believe her if we tell them she's lying against us?" Kahindi shook his head. "You have to stop shivering. Let's plan on what to tell Em and Dad if our neighbor Dare tells them about this." Tayo added by noon. Their mother Wana returned from work earlier than usual, planning to cook for Sunday. Tayo joined her in the kitchen, washing vegetables while Kahindi tried to keep the mood light. As he throws some topics at her as they discuss, their hearts sank. When the neighbor arrived, she stepped into the kitchen with an unfriendly expression on her face. "Good afternoon, Wana," she greeted Wana, paused before responding in good afternoon. "How can I help you?" The neighbor wasted no time. "I don't need anything from you. I'm just here to report something important about your kids." "A report about my kids? What is it about?" "Can you believe that I caught them almost having sex earlier today?" the neighbor stated firmly. Wana froze. She gently stood up from the small kitchen chair she was sitting on. "I don't think I heard you correctly," she said softly. The neighbor heated herself. Wana stared at her for a long moment before glancing at her children. "Mommy, she's lying, Joe," quickly interjected. "We were just playing in the room. She knocked on the door and insisted we were having an affair. But it's not true." The neighbor's face darkened. "What, Tayo? So you can lie this boldly?" "Auntie, I'm not lying." Tayo insisted. "Kahindi, am I lying?" Kahindi nodded slowly, his heart pounding. The neighbor turned back to Wana, her voice rising with frustration. "These kids are lying, Wana. I'm telling you to discipline them properly. You're spoiling them with all this leniency." Before the neighbor could finish her sentence, a resounding slap echoed through the kitchen. Yua's hand hovered in the air and her face was twisted with anger. "Excuse me, who are you to teach me how to raise my children?" Balyu snapped. "Are you out of your senses? They are twins. They share everything. You have no right to spread such wrong accusations about them." The neighbor held her cheek, her eyes wide with shock. "You slapped me," she whispered, "and I'll do it again if you dare come here with such nonsense." Wana shouted, "Get out of my house before I lose my temper entirely." Tears streamed down the neighbor's face as she backed away, regretting her decision to interfere. "Why are you still standing there?" "Do you want me to push you out?" Wana shouted, dragging her out of the kitchen. "I told you Mom wouldn't believe her stupid words. She got what she deserved," Tayo said, laughing later that evening around 8:30 p.m. Wana instructed the twins to take their baths before dinner. Tayo was the first to enter the bathroom, but rushed out almost immediately. "What's wrong?" Wana asked Mom. "I'm scared. I can't bath alone in that bathroom." Tayo asked, with fear edge on her face. "Scared of what? I thought there's light there," Wana queried. "Yes, but it feels like someone is standing behind me in the bathroom. While I'm about taking my bath, I can't stay with you in the bathroom. I'm trying to reach your dad, but his line isn't going through." "What do you now want us to do?" Wana asked. Mom, since you can't stay with me, can Kahindi come? Let's bath together. We're twins after all. We do everything together," Tayo said with a sad look on her face. Wana raised an eyebrow, her fingers still scrolling on her phone. "Bathe with Kahindi? Are you sure about that?" "Yes, Mom," Tayo replied confidently. "There's nothing wrong with it. He's my twin brother after all." Wana turned her gaze to Kahindi, who stood silently to the side. "What about you? Are you okay with this?" she asked, studying his expression. Kahindi nodded slowly. "Yeah, I'm fine with it." Wana shrugged, already distracted by her phone again. "All right. Then both of you should hurry up. Go to the bathroom and take your baths quickly, before your food gets cold." Tayo smiled faintly and led her brother toward the bathroom. Once inside, she locked the door behind them and turned to face him. A mischievous glint in her eyes as she began undressing him. She whispered, "I've noticed you don't seem scared anymore. You're starting to enjoy my touch, aren't you? I told you not to be afraid. Mom will never believe that." "Our gossip neighbor," Tayo said, stroking his D before putting it in her mouth. Cindy's cheeks flushed and he stammered, "But how did you learn all this?" Tayo Kahindi stammered, lost in ecstasy. "I've watched some videos on our phone that shows how it's done, and I've also seen Mom and Dad doing it in the middle of the night when I woke up to urinate." Her voice trailed off as she continued with her actions. "Take it easy," Kahindi yelped, his voice trembling. "I'm feeling strange." He gripped the edge of the sink, his face a mixture of discomfort and confusion. Tayo ignored his protests and continued. "Tayo, Kahindi, are you two still in there?" His voice suddenly rang out from the living room. "I'm not hearing the sounds of any water in that bathroom, and your food is getting cold. We're almost done." "Mom," Tayo called back, without hesitation. "We're just scrubbing ourselves with the sponge. That's why you don't hear the water, all right? Hurry up before your dad gets home." Wana didn't press further. A few minutes later, the twins walked out of the bathroom and returned to their room, feeling excited and relieved. "How did it feel?" Tayo asked in a low voice. Kahindi hesitated, then replied, "Wow, it was magical. I felt like I was in another world. You're indeed special in this," he added. "I usually feel good, and I always have a good night's sleep after this," he said, shilly, as they got dressed. "I knew you'd like it. You're satisfying me too. You know that means we should be doing it more often," Tayo said with a soft laugh. "Come on, let's go join Mom at the dining table," she said after they're dressed. They made their way to the table just as their father Frank returned home. Wana, still angry from the neighbor's earlier report, wasted no time in reporting her to her husband as soon as he stepped through the door. "Honey, you need to warn that woman," she exclaimed, her voice thick with anger. "Tell her to stay out of our family's business or I'll deal with her myself." "Calm down, babe. Frank said it's late. I'll speak to her in the morning. You better do," Wana snapped. "I won't tolerate her anymore." Frank nodded. I will, I promise. But let's not talk about that now. I have good news. Yu's expression softened slightly. Good news? What is it? Frank grinned and pulled an invitation card from his bag. Surprise, he said, handing it to her. W's eyes lit up as she read the card. A dinner night. The company is inviting workers and their spouses. She gasped in excitement. I've been wanting to visit your workplace for ages, Frank chuckled. Yes, and now you'll finally get to come. It'll be fun. But what about the kids? Juana asked her, excitement momentarily dimming. Can we leave them alone? Tayo, overhearing, quickly chimed in. Mom, don't worry, you're free to go with Dad. We can manage ourselves, she said with an eager tone, glancing at Kahindi. Right, Kahindi. Kahindi nodded, smiling. Yes, Mom, we can handle ourselves. We're 16 now, we're not kids anymore. Juana studied their faces, her motherly intuition kicking in. Something about their excitement felt off. They usually protested or asked endless questions whenever she planned to leave with Frank. This eagerness was strange, really. I don't want anyone calling me halfway through the evening, begging me to come back home, she said, her tone skeptical. No, Mom, we won't disturb you. Go have fun at the party with Dad. Kahindi said, convincingly, we'll just sit back and watch some movies. Juana squinted slightly, her instincts telling her that something wasn't right. She murmured under her breath. These kids don't act like this. Something is wrong somewhere. But she chose not to voice her suspicions aloud. Instead, she nodded. All right, then I'll go with your father. But remember, no misbehavior. Frank had just returned from work and was already enjoying his dinner. Yu's thoughts remained on the twins' odd behavior. Later that night, as she lay in bed, her mind kept circling back to the way they had reacted. These kids don't usually act this way. She thought, could it be that something is wrong, or are they just growing up? She sighed, her neighbor's earlier words echoing in her mind. Are you sure those kids aren't doing something they shouldn't be doing? No, Juana whispered to herself, shaking her head. My children can't do such a thing. That woman is just trying to cause trouble. She waves off the thought, forcing herself to sleep. Sleep refused to come, and Juana found her sitting at the edge of the bed, biting her nails. I need to know for sure, she murmured. I need to put my mind at ease. She got up quietly and walked to Frank's old work bag. Frank was once a photographer before landing his current job. From the bag she pulled out a small camera. With careful steps, she tiptoed to the twins' room. Their door was slightly ajar, and the room was dark except for the soft glow of a bedside lamp. Juana slipped inside mount to the camera on top of their wardrobe and adjusted it to face their beds. Then she crept out, just as silently, her heart pounding. If there's any truth to what that woman said, this camera will prove it. But I know in my heart, my children wouldn't do such a thing, she whispered to herself, biting her fingers nervously. Finally, exhaustion overtook her, and she drifted off to sleep the next evening. Juana stood in front of the mirror, applying some powder to her face, as Taiwo and Kahindi stared at her mom. You look so beautiful, Tayo said with a smile. Yeah, more beautiful than Queen Elizabeth of England, Kahindi added. Grinning, Juana laughed softly. Thank you, my darlings. She turned to them, her expression turning serious. Now, listen to me. Be good while your father and I are out tonight. No trouble, no issues, and no bothering the neighbors. Understand? Yes, Mom, TW replied quickly. We'll stay inside the house till you and Dad returns. You won't have to worry about anything. Juana smiled, kissing them both on their cheeks. That's what I like to hear. The twins followed her outside where Frank was waiting by the car. Juana waved to them one last time before climbing into the passenger seat. The car's engine roared to life, and they drove off into the evening. As soon as the car disappeared from view, Kahindi turned to his sister. What next? He asked, his voice low. Tao's lips curled into a sly smile. Stop acting like you don't know, she replied romantically.